Okay, I do hope you can hear me because I'm so delighted to be with all of you and to firstly thank Verena for inviting me and for also sharing her vision of bringing dietetics and nutrition to SIT and Singapore. And I'm also very delighted to be with you, the budding students of both dietetics and nutrition in Singapore. I'm only sorry that I couldn't be with you in person, but I hope you can hear me. Can somebody shout out or wave your hands if you can hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, good, great. Well, the topic of my presentation is basal metabolic rate, its importance in estimating human energy requirements. And I wanted to remind you that the fundamental aspects of human nutrition and dietetics is to meet your energy requirements. And if you look at the equation at the end or the bottom of the slides, you will see that energy balance is equal to intake minus expenditure. And all of you as adults who have retained your growth pattern and are in energy equilibrium, you want to make sure that your food intake exactly matches your energy expenditure, and therefore you are in what is called energy equilibrium or energy balance, because if you eat more than you expend, you will put on body weight, and if you expend more than you intake, you will lose weight. So therefore, it is important for us to remind ourselves that in dietetics and in nutrition, the most important component of human health is to meet your energy requirements. If you don't meet your energy requirements, no amount of proteins that you consume or no amount of vitamins or minerals or fatty acids that you consume are going to be effectively utilized, and therefore energy needs becomes fundamental. Now, from this equation, you can appreciate that you can measure energy requirements by looking at food intake. And as dietitians, you know already how difficult it is to measure your food intake. Whatever the technique you use, whether you use food diary or you take photographs or you do any kind of wearing Google glasses or what have you, it is a formidable challenge to measure your food intake and to translate that into your energy requirements. So therefore, about 40 years ago, people were thinking, can we use energy expenditure to provide some insights into our energy requirements? And that was the genesis of our journey of estimating energy requirements. So it is sobering to remind ourselves our interest in energy metabolism goes back to almost 200 years ago, when this French chemist called Lavoisier did a classical study using a guinea pig. So you can see Lavoisier with his wife in 1783. And what he did was that he put a guinea pig in an ice chamber, and he found that he could predict the energy expenditure as heat from the amount of water that was formed from ice. And from your A-level physics, you will know from the latent heat of fusion of ice, you can predict the amount of heat that was generated by the guinea pig. Concomitantly, the genius of Lavoisier, that he measured the oxygen consumption of the guinea pig and the carbon dioxide produced by the guinea pig, and he found his surprise that the amount of heat produced by the guinea pig was proportional to the amount of oxygen it consumed and the amount of carbon dioxide that is produced. And this triangulation of heat production, oxygen consumption, and carbon dioxide is at the basis of how we measure BMR, or basal metabolic rate, even today. And that, I think, is an important, sobering fact that energy metabolism is not a new discipline at all. So that's the history, but look at the second sentence. Hyperthyroidism, as clinicians and dietitians, you will know that we measure hyper and hyperthyroidism today by looking for a hormone in your blood called thyroxine. But in the 1900s, the easiest way that a doctor would know that your hyperthyroidism was to measure your basal metabolic rate. Why? Because people with hyperthyroidism had a hyper metabolic rate, and therefore this was a simple diagnostic instrument to measure people predictively whether you're hyper or hyperthyroidism. And of course, in 1923, almost 100 years ago, a British scientist called Basal suggested, and I use the word suggested, saying, can we use BMR to predict energy requirements? And he had to wait for about 60 years ago for us to normalize that concept in a more defined fashion. So what really is basal metabolic rate? BMR is the measurement of an individual's metabolism at a basal state, and it is defined by the minimal energy requirements or expenditure needed to sustain life at a resting state. So I want you to reflect on three sentences, or three words. Resting, right? Basal, you're not doing anything. And it essentially means that it is to keep your heart, lungs, brain, kidney, guts, etc. at basal. So I give you a metaphor. You have a car that many of you drive, and if the car is at neutral, at a traffic light, it's still burning fuel, but it's not going anywhere. And that's exactly what BMR is. BMR is the energy that you expend when you're at neutral, doing nothing. But it is required every minute of the day, every day of the year, every month of the week, and therefore it is a continuous flux measurement that happens from birth till you die. And that's a very important point. It's an immutable use of your energy. So here is the criteria under which you have to measure your BMR. We've already talked about it being a basal energy expenditure, but notice the criteria under which you have to measure BMR. After a good night's sleep, and you might argue what that means. No strenuous exercise, 12 hours after a meal, in mental and physical relaxation. So there are very strict conditions that you need to apply when you measure BMR. And I want to also draw your attention to this statement called thermoneutral conditions. Thermoneutral conditions is when you're wearing light clothes, a t-shirt or a shirt, and your temperature of the room is between 22 to 24 degrees centigrade. Why? Because anything below that, your body will start to shiver, and anything after 25 to 26 degrees, you might start to sweat. So it's important that BMR is measured under thermoneutral conditions and following this strict criteria. And you can now see why it becomes imperative for us to find an indirect measurement of BMR, because BMR measurements are onerous, time-consuming, expensive, and above all, hard for all of us to achieve. So, what are the factors that influence BMR? More lean body mass you have, higher the BMR, and we'll explain why. If you have a higher lean body mass, in general, you'll have a higher body weight. higher body weight will mean that you'll have a higher BMR. Fortunately or unfortunately, from the time of 30 to 40 years, for every 10 years that you increase in age, your lean body mass declines and your BMR also tends to decline. And most men for the same body weight have slightly higher BMR than women because the lean tissue to adipose tissue in men is different that you see in women. And of course, if you are a very vigorously active person, your muscle integrity may be slightly higher, so you might have a higher BMR. Am I going too fast? Wave your hand if I'm not. Okay, good. So, how do you measure BMR? BMR, if you remember from the study of Lavoisier, can be measured by using the amount of heat you produce, and that's what's called a direct calorimeter. You live inside a room that has got thermocouples that pick up your heat production, which is rarely used now, and we tend to use indirect calorimetry, which is what I remember talked to you about by measuring the amount of oxygen that you consume and the carbon dioxide that you produce. And here you see an indirect calorimeter that we have in our clinical research center. Is the only one of its kind in Asia. And you're most welcome to come with Verena to visit us to see for yourself the showpiece of our CNRC, that we have a direct calorimeter. And by the way, you're most welcome to become volunteers. We are always looking for volunteers. We'll give you food, we'll give you pocket money, and you can live in our chamber for up to a week if Verena gives you permission. And you can see here, this is a whole body calorimeter, and you can measure your BMR and physical activity. And here you see an indirect calorimeter using a ventilated hood that can measure BMR. So we have here in Singapore state-of-the-art instrumentation that we can be matching anywhere else in the Western world. And as Verena pointed out, we in Singapore are punching as weighty as we are with any other Western country, both in terms of nutrition research, dietetic training, and nutritional paradigms. So, many of you who are dietitians would have come across this Harris and Benedict's equation, which is almost 100 years old, which is widely consumed in predicting your BMR, based, as you can see, on an incredibly small number of people, 136 males and 100 females. Because it was one of the earliest predictive equations of BMR, it is very much found in the textbooks of nutrition and dietetics, but increasingly less so, because as we shall see, there are more advanced predictive equations for BMR. But just to remind you that, as I mentioned a moment ago, the idea of predicting BMR using equations is not a new idea. That's to point out to you that the Harris-Benedict equation is an old equation that has been widely used for many, many years in the past. So, the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is a UN agency in Rome, has been interested in trying to articulate how can I measure the calorie needs of humankind in the world since the time just before the end of the war in 1948. Why? Because Wallace Aykroyd was a British scientist. He was one of the first directors of the FAO, and he said, guys, even if we tentatively make a recommendation, it would have immediate practical value, because we can now allow countries to predict how much of food they require either to import or to grow. So it's got profound implications on public health, public policy, and strategy in terms of the nutritional and food requirements of a nation. And we'll see an example of this in real life at a later stage of my presentation. Similarly, you can see over the years many organizations right through the decades have come to look at energy requirements and protein requirements using the FAO and the WHO, the World Health Organization, as the stat boards to give us a prediction. And since this was published in 1985, we have another document called the 2005 Energy Requirements Document, which is the latest one that we use to predict energy requirements. So, you've been told very lucidly what is BMR. Now, I want to share with you something remarkably amazing. What contributes to our BMR? Let me walk you through this slide. This is the organ that we're going to look at. This is the weight of the organ. Liver is about 1.5 to 1.6 kilograms in weight. That represents about 2.5% of the body weight. But notice that the liver contributes to 25% of your BMR. Can you imagine? One small, tiny little organ. Same with your brain. Now, you know that the human brain is the most active of all homeothermic brains. No other brain size matches that of the human brain apart from the dolphin. And of course, the dolphin, as you know, doesn't have an IQ of most of us. And notice that your brain uses 25% of your energy expenditure at BMR. So now you can see the brain, liver, heart, and kidney, that represents 3.5 kilograms and is about 5% of your body weight, uses up nearly 70% of your BMR. Amazing. That's tiny little organs, uses up so much of your BMR. And that tells you something very, very tantalizing, that your BMR is surprisingly controlled by these organs, or put another way, your skeletal muscle, which is 40% of your body weight, representing 28% of your BMR, is roughly what your liver and your brain are using up every minute of the day. So don't be under the illusion that you are a muscle man and you're going to use up more and more energy. It's your brain, your liver, your heart, and the kidney that's working incessantly, minute by minute, day by day, that uses up your BMR. And remember, don't ask your mom to give you more food because you'll be reading a textbook and say, Mom, I'm very tired because my brain is tired. No, your brain does not use more energy when you do complex calculations because the neurons are firing every microsecond of the day. So don't be under the illusion that by using your brain, you need more energy. So that's a very interesting observation, which I hope you'll agree is a revelatory part of the human species. Now, even more fascinating is what happens when you are a baby. When you're a baby, you're about 3.5 kilograms in body weight, and your brain is 14% of your body weight and uses up 70% of your BMR. Your newborn baby is actually burning like a flame through its head. And that is why you have to be sure that these kids are given nutrients that the mother can give through a breast milk, because the brain grows incredibly fast during the first years of life. And you can see that even at the age of 1 year, it's using 50% of your BMR. And even at 10 years, when you are half your age today, it's using up 34%. And as I said a moment ago, even as an adult that you are now, it's using up 25% of your energy expenditure. So the brain is small in size, but large in terms of contribution to your energy as BMR. So we have defined what BMR is. Now, if we are going to use BMR as a proxy indicator of your energy requirements, we need to ask, how stable is your BMR? So this was a study done by Benedict, was a very famous scientist living in Washington. He was a great scientist of physiology. And so what this guy did was, only people like him could do it. He measured his BMR for over a month every single day. And he published this paper, which I pulled out from 1932. And you can see that Benedict was a male. The male BMR is pretty constant. You know, it's remarkable that a physiological measurement of BMR can show such constancy, because most physiological parameters don't show that degree of constancy like a Hooke's law or a Boyle's law or a Charles' law. So that's the question we're asking. So it turns out that the constancy of BMR is much more assured in males. And this was a paper that we published some years ago with my colleague, Professor Shetty, where we looked at the constancy of BMR over days, over weeks, over months, and over years. You can see it's pretty constant. And you can't deny the fact that for a physiological measurement, the intra-individual variabilities is remarkably small. What about women? It doesn't seem to be so, because this is a paper we published nearly 20 years ago, where we showed that certain women appear to have a very constant BMR, as you can see, very similar to what we see in males. But there are another group of women that show very high variability. So we have two clusters of women. One group of women, I call them flat as a pancake. Those are constant BMR. And another group of women that are like a yo-yo. They have a very fluctuating BMR. And the posit that we made some years ago, that maybe that women that have a varying BMR are better able to maintain body weight. And that's a rhetorical question, because you and I know that you got a friendly neighbor and she can eat and eat and eat everything that she wants to devour and is skinny as a broomstick. And you have another friend of yours, she only has to look at a kaya toast and she's put on weight. How is it possible? And this is the biggest enigma in nutritional science. How do men and women maintain body weight? And it looks like the constancy of BMR and the variability of BMR may, I repeat the word may, have some contributory role to play. And this is what I'm sharing with you. This is not an incontrovertibly conclusive discourse that we can have. So let me come back to the 1985 FAO-WHO report, which said for the first time, compared to food intake, which is nearly impossible to measure with accuracy, let us use energy expenditure to predict our human energy requirements. And therefore, we had the Schofield equation, which was the one that the FAO and the WHO used in 1985. But I wanted to draw your attention to what were the shortcomings of this predictive equation. The Schofield equations, who happened to be a friend of mine at the London School of Tropical Medicine, where I was studying and working, they collected this data over the period of 1930s and 1940s. But unfortunately, the predominant number of the subjects were from Italian subjects who were conscripts from the military. So here you see the BMR equations, the number of subjects for each age band, 4,000 totally, and of which nearly 50% were from Italians. And here you can see for the females again, about 20% were Italians. Now, there's nothing wrong with Italians, but the point is that they were, in my humble view, a skewed cohort that were relatively small in total number, about 7,000 in total, for predictive equations for basal metabolic rate. So when I was in Oxford, I started to collect data on a much larger number of people, almost twice the number, about 13,000 data points or 14,000. That was based on a very large number of people from all across the world, Asians, Africans, Latin Americans, Ethiopians, name it. And that formed the basis of what we now call the Henry equations, which you're all familiar with. And as you know, you are very familiar with from the lectures that Verena and her team have been providing. Now I'm going to use, for simplicity, the kilocalories per day equation. As you know, the age bands are the same as we used before for 0 to 3, 3 to 10, 10 to 18, 18 to 30, etc. And one for gender, males, and another for females. And these are the equations that you are able to use consistently and concordantly. So the three key points are, firstly, all you need is your body weight to get your predictive equation of the BMR for each age band and for each gender. So that gives you a pivotal advantage. No need of calorimetry, no need of going to a lab, no need of measuring your BMR under a hood or an indirect calorimeter. I have in my hand a simple instrument that can give you a predictive power for your BMR. Remember, it's only for your BMR. So you need to be cognizant that your basal metabolic rate is the largest part of your energy expenditure that happens every minute of the day. Remember, physical activity, we don't tend to do every single minute of the day. Even if you're in the military, you don't do. So it's about 50 to 30%. Diet-induced thermogenesis is the energy that you expend when you consume any food. So when you go for lunch today in a few minutes time, the food that you consume will generate some heat, and that's called diet-induced thermogenesis. And growth, I hope none of you boys and girls, as I call you, ladies and gentlemen, are not growing, because you should have grown and finished growth when you hit puberty. And the only time you will grow next is when you give birth to a baby, and the baby grows, you're growing. And the next time as a female you grow is when you are lactating as a mother, because breast milk is also a form of growth. So if you ignore growth, you will find that the next hierarchy of contributor to total energy expenditure is physical activity and diet-induced thermogenesis. So if I want to measure your total energy requirements, I need to find a factor that will accommodate these two components, because we are now able to predict BMR from our equations. We now need to increase that value by a certain proportion to contribute to your physical activity and your diet-induced thermogenesis. So here is the definition of your energy requirements. It is basically the energy requirements of an individual is the level of energy intake from food that will balance energy expenditure. Remember, that's BMR plus physical activity plus diet-induced thermogenesis, depending on the body size, the composition, level of physical activity, to maintain good health. And as I said to you a moment ago, the only time the growth component will come is when you're pregnant or lactating, because you have attained all your growth as and when you hit puberty. So to measure total energy expenditure, the easiest way is to measure your basal metabolic rate, which we now know can be done using your predictive equation. And we now have to have the BMR multiply what's called a physical activity level. I'll explain what that is, which is to give you a factor that will take into account your physical activity and your diet-induced thermogenesis. So as you know, when you are sitting and standing, your energy expenditure is very, very small. If I convert that to kilocalories per minute divided by 4.18, that's about 1.2 kilocalories per minute. When you're washing, it goes up to about 3. When you're walking briskly, it goes up to about 5 kilocalories per minute. And walking up and down the stairs, it goes up to about 7 kilocalories per minute. So this is something very interesting. You don't need to go up and down a gym to explain energy expenditure. You only have to go up and down the block of flats that you are dwelling in to expend quite a lot of energy. And this is something that I want to share with you. And this gives you light, moderate, and strenuous physical activity. And you can see here, light physical activity divided by 4.18 to convert kilojoules to kilocalories is about 3 to 5. And here it's about 6 to 7. And this is about 8 kilocalories per minute. So here you see the METs, which is actually the proportion by which your energy expenditure divided by your BMR. Again, very similar to what you've seen a moment ago. That's to give you a kind of a montage of the values that you will see. Now, here is what I'm coming to. So basically, physical activity level is your total energy expenditure divided by the basal metabolic rate. And in general, most of us are either light or moderate physical activity, which will be 1.5 times your BMR. So once I know your BMR, to calculate your total energy requirements, all I've got to do is to multiply your BMR by 1.5, which is by 50%, to take account of those two variables, physical activity and diet-induced thermogenesis. I hope that's reasonably lucid. So these are the physical activity levels that the FAO, WHO define for people mostly living all around the world. You can see that for people that are light physical activity, the PAL level is 1.4 to 1.69, moderate is 1.7 to 1.99, and vigorously activity is 2 times to 2.4. So 2 times means your BMR multiplied by 2. So unfortunately or fortunately, most of us living in populations like in Asia and most emerging countries, we are either light or moderate physical activity, because none of us are vigorously running marathons or combatants going about their daily lives. So I'm going to share with you, have any of you brought yourself a calculator? Hands up. Yes, okay. So let me, those that are with a calculator, let me walk you through. Let's assume that you are, even if you're a male, you're a 21-year-old female who's 50 kilograms, okay? And using a calculator, you can calculate your BMR, which is from the Henry equation, 13.1 times 50 plus 558 will be 1213. Is that okay? So basically, we have used the equations for an 18 to 30-year-old. So you're 21 years old, weighing 50 kilograms. We took our equation, which is 13.1 times 50 plus 558 is 1213. Did any of you get the answer? Hands up. Anybody got the answer? MC, anybody got the answer? Okay, I assume that it was a straightforward calculation.
Yes,
Hello?
Prof. I think a lot of them got the answer with your guidance.
Oh, good, good. And then remember, with the BMR, we now have to multiply that by 1.5 to take account of your physical activity and your diet-induced thermogenesis, and voila, you get a number 1800 kilocalories per day. And that would agree with me is a respectable energy requirement for a young female weighing 50 kilograms. So it's a very, very simple calculation to do, and it gives you a value that's reasonable, that is robust, and above all, practical to achieve. So as budding dietitian and nutritionist, you will be called upon to make assessment of your food requirements and energy requirements for hospital patients or clients that you want to either gain weight or lose weight. If you want to lose weight, you got to provide a diet plan that will be less than 1500 calories. And as Brina will tell you, if you want to put on weight, somebody who's malnourished, you got to increase that by about 300 calories. So that's a very, very simple methodology. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take you through a more real life situation. Can I estimate the food needs of our population in Singapore? Provocatively challenging idea. And I'm going to walk you through this. Very simple. And you can see now the power of this calculation. So let's start with our simple estimation. Population of Singapore, about 5 million. And I made it 6 million. So therefore, I put 6 times 10 to the power 6 is 6 million people. Everybody agree with that? Agree? Hands up. Agree? Agree. Okay. To make this is our population pyramid. So to make life easy, because we need to make some approximations, let's assume that the mean body weight of our entire population, forget about the children, forget about the toddlers, forget about the elderly, we'll all say that the mean body weight of our Singaporean population is 50 kilograms. Okay, that's an approximation. And that approximation is reasonably good. So now we can do exactly what you did a moment ago, and I will walk you through this. So these are males. So therefore, we'll use the male predictive equation, which is 16 times 50 plus 545, which is 1345 kilocalories for BMR. Let me stop here to check that you are following the flow of the argument. Can somebody say whether the argument is agreeable and has been followed?
Okay, if everyone can show a thumbs up if you all can follow what Prof. Jia just mentioned about everyone's population is 50 kg and it's males. And then 16 times 50 plus 545 gives you 1345 if everyone can follow.
Okay. We can stop a bit more. And of course, those who have done this calculation have to remember to multiply by 1.5, which is 2000 kilocalories per day per head is the energy requirements of a population that's based on 6 million people, right? And I come back. Let me pause here. MC, just check whether they're happy with the 2000 kilocalories per day.
So did everyone get 2017 after you multiply 1345 by the PAL of 1.5? All good? Anyone get a different answer? No, right?
Okay, good. So now we are going to translate your energy requirements into food requirements. So let's assume that 1 gram of rice is approximately 4 kilocalories. 1 gram is about 4 kilocalories. Therefore, the total amount of rice you require per person per day will be this number, right? This number, 2000 calories divided by 4, which is rounded to 500 grams, right? So in other words, each of you that weighs 50 kilograms will require half a kilogram of rice per day to meet your energy requirement. Remember that this is a theoretical calculation because humans cannot live on rice alone. But this tells you the power of the BMR, the power of our calculation, and the power that it gives you to predict human food requirement. Okay, so now are you all happy here that you got about half a kilogram? So now we know the population of Singapore is 6 billion. And if we want half a kilogram per day per person, we will need 3 million kilograms, or 1 ton is 1000 kilograms. So therefore, we will need in Singapore 3000 metric tons per day of rice alone to feed our population. So let me walk you through this. All I've done is to convert the calorie requirements into rice requirements, and it's about half a kilogram. I took the half a kilogram, multiplied by our population, and therefore I got 3 times 10 to the power 6 kilograms. And because 1 ton is 1000 kilograms, I divided this 10 to the power 6 by 1000. Therefore, I got 3 into 10 to the power 6, that is 3000 metric tons of rice per day. So ladies and gentlemen, you now have, for the first time in history, a technically competent way that you can provide to the government of any country or any institution, whether it's an elderly home or a charity home. All you got to do is to downgrade the number multiplied by the BMR, knowing your body weight. So all you need for this calculation is only 5 things: age, gender, body weight, predict your BMR, predict your total energy expenditure, convert the energy requirement into food requirements. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've convinced you of the power of the BMR, and that BMR is a simple but valuable measurement to assess the energy requirements of both individual and the population. BMR can now be predicted accurately from body weight alone, and by knowing the physical activity level, we can now calculate both at individual and the group level, estimate your total energy requirements, from which we can calculate your food requirement. And therefore, BMR becomes a very essential instrument for assessing human energy requirements, both in you as an individual, your family, your collective, and all of people in Singapore and beyond. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for inviting me and to say how proud I am for SIT to take the lead in bringing to Singapore the next generation of dietitians and nutritionists that are going to not only be the leading light in Singapore, but beyond, because what we do here in Singapore is not only going to be a beacon of hope for us in Singapore, but a light to the entire world. And I wish you all the very best for the future, because quite honestly, dietetics and nutrition are one of the most exciting disciplines that you can be in, because guess what? It can touch human lives like no other. So thank you very much, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Prof. J, for the very informational lecture. Prof. J, can I just check with you, because we are a bit overrun on your end also. Do you have any time for any Q&A?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, just give me a minute. I just take over the screen to show you the list of questions that our students have for you regarding the lecture that you have just provided us with. Okay, in case you all have not, oh, okay, there's a lot of questions I see. Okay, so Prof. J, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so the first question that we have for you here is that, is there any other version of Henry equation that includes height as a factor to calculate BMR?
The answer is yes, but by adding height to the body weight, the increase in accuracy is very marginal. And as you know, people know their body weight more than their height. So I think the short answer is it is not an advantage to have height on your side, because the accuracy of prediction is not improved considerably. Yeah.
Okay, does that answer the question that whoever that raised this question, because everyone is anonymous here?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. For sedentary pal values, put a 1.4% high individual mostly sitting. Well, the short answer is probably yes, 1.4, but 1.2 may be, in my humble view, slightly low, because what you don't want is to have people that are on 1.2 times BMR go into what's called undernutrition, because 20% higher will just only cover your diet-induced thermogenesis. So just sitting alone, nobody hopefully will be just sitting by themselves, a bit of walking. So somewhere between 1.4 and 1.2 would be my recommendation.
All right, thank you very much for explanation for that question, Prof. So moving on to the next question. So you mentioned that the food needs such as rice may be like estimated for the population in Singapore. Is this method widely used, and is it done for all types of foods?
Well, I think it's done perhaps not so much at a national level, because most of us don't have one staple. I use that as an example because rice is much easier to understand in our Asian culture. So yes, nations have used this, but I think in my experience, people have used it particularly when you're trying to feed people in an elderly home, or in hospitals, or in my own personal case, when I've had to predict the needs of food in a refugee camp. When in a refugee camp you have 5,000 or 10,000 people coming in every day, how do we predict the food requirement? So I think the answer is yes, but it also depends on how you use it in a common sense way. So that example was you to say, to open up the opportunities for you to say, in our practices of dietetics and nutrition, you have opportunity to use it in a more practical way, and that's what it's all about. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. So moving on to the next question, why is the PAL for Asians lower than Westerners? So it's like 1.5, while Westerners is 1.67.
Very good. So one of the reasons is that you'll be quite pleased or not pleased to know that for any comparable body weight, let's assume that you and I are 60 kilograms. And if I was living as a Caucasian in Oxford, my BMR compared to you who are living in Singapore is about 8 to 10% higher. Caucasians seem to have a slightly higher BMR than Asians or Africans, weight for weight. So therefore, if you have a similar 1.67, your energy expenditure will be even more higher. So therefore, we tend to have a slightly smaller BMR multiplied by 1.5. You see what I mean? Yeah. Not all calories are the same. Very complicated question. And I think the short answer is not all food calories are the same. So for example, if you look at the metabolizable energy of fat is much more efficient than protein. So the metabolic energy of protein, or let me start again. The gross energy of protein is 5.7, and the metabolic energy of protein is 4. So you lose 1.7 calories during the process of digestion and passage through the urine. So the short answer is not all foods have the same calorie conversion, but I think as a simple approximation, you can say that proteins are the most inefficiently utilized and fats are the most efficiently utilized, followed by carbohydrates.
Thank you so much, Prof. So I think the next question is more like everyone thing, even including myself. Like we are interested whether is there any like appendix or publications of yours of so many that you have published, right? So we were thinking whether do you have any publications that we can actually tap on what I have presented today to actually access it so that we can use for our future practice?
Sure. There is a paper well, I will send the reference to Verena and she can pass it on to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof. Anybody on the ground has any questions that you would like to ask face to face? That this is a rare chance we have with Prof. Jaya over here. Anyone has any questions to ask? As in, don't need to be shy if you have any question. Okay, I think Prof. Jay, I think that's all for our end. I think if we have any more questions, maybe they are too shy to ask you, maybe we can collate it and then we can send it to Prof. Verena to send it to you. Sure. Because I think everybody is still trying to digest what you have just shared with us also at the same time. All right. Okay. All the very best to you all. Yeah. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you so much, Prof. Is it okay if we take a picture with you, Prof? Sure. Okay. Let us get ready, then we can take a picture with you. Those that are joining us through Zoom, because you all can turn on your cam also so that we can take picture with you also. Oh, very good. Okay, let me try to figure out this. Sorry, just give me a minute. Yeah.
I think on our side it is okay because Cheryl will be screenshotting from the side. Okay.
So-
You can't tell them Cheryl.
All right. So those who are online, you can feel free to turn on your camera to join us. Then we can take a screenshot. Those who are on scene, you're also in the picture actually. So you all can actually, pose also. If you all can see from your end over there, the small screen with Prof. J here. So you all can just pose also. Then we can take a picture in a bit. Those who are online, okay, I can. So are we ready? Are you ready to take a picture? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Jaya, for taking your time off to give us this lecture. Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, Prof. So I think we will just we have come to the end of our celebration. So once again, thank you for taking your time off your busy schedule to join us today to give us a very informational lecture. Thank you so much, Prof.
So bye-bye. All the best. Hello.
Thanks, Prof.
Thank you. All the best.
See you around.
All right, see you around. Bye-bye.